hi everyone, Serenity here, and this is something I'm really excited about, that I think it's something I actually suggested in one of my very old videos, unfortunately not on this channel, but it was something I described in a very old video that I personally think that there should be a social raid. I've always thought the idea of a social raid would be very exciting, a bit kind of like how Guild Wars does social events, but they don't do social raids, they just do social events. But I've always thought a social raid would be a good idea, and it looks to be that Bungie have actually looked at that idea and come up with a space which might have some form of social element to it. Now, they've said that what happens in the raid will affect the social area of the dreamscape or dream world, whatever it's called. It is called the Dreaming City. It's the Awoken Homeland, apparently. That's the one. The whole space looks like, and from what they kind of described, is going to be manipulated by how raid groups play. Now, I'm wondering if that means that if a raid group is going through an area, maybe you'll see them fighting a boss or something like that, or maybe you can... That's what I want. That's what I want. And by the way, it's right there. People say it sounds like you cut very often when you talk. It's not. I just interrupt myself. Unfortunately, I'm just a very bombastic talker when it actually comes to talking. I interrupt myself because I think of something I want to say. But it is this whole idea that, just imagine, like, there's this really awesome boss fight, because they said there's more boss fights in this one raid than any raid before it, which is fantastic. That's what I've wanted, it's what a lot of people wanted. Less puzzles, more fucking raiding. The puzzles can be in between, more fucking boss fights. The boss fights were so good. The Taken King ones are so memorable. Just, I absolutely adored War Priest, Golgoroth, just everything about those fights. I adored all of them. And same with Atheon and Templar. There's just so many good fucking boss fights in those raids. Like, Christ. And that's what we want again. But imagine this. Imagine there's a social space. You can hear the clattering of a raid group going through a raid. You see them wipe. They reload. Start fighting again. They're really struggling. Imagine after like 5-10 times there's this key. Maybe you earn it by beating the raid or something. And you can see this team struggling. You can maybe get one of these keys a week or something like that. And it allows you to drop something into the raid, like a healing pool of rejuvenation, or it allows you to unlock a room that they can hide in, shoot from, or a safe space. It gives you some advantage in the raid that someone from the outside could manipulate. How cool would that be? Like, or maybe they could drop, like, a sword in there, like the Crota sword. Maybe they could drop something in there, like, well, a bit like the, what's the game type called? I can't remember. Greedy? Gimmick? Grimlick? I don't remember. The new game type that looked really fucking cool. Imagine you could drop in some friendly ads to help you fight. Like, you could drop in a boss to fight on your side. All these kind of, hi, I'm from New York. All these kind of things I think would be personally just awesome. Or the ability, if someone is struggling with a puzzle, you could use this key to maybe build a stairway for them, or to get a ship to fly them across, maybe even your ship. I would also like, there was a bit in there where you saw a bombing run. Now, I'm not sure if this is related to the thing, or whether it was just a PvP, like, oh, this looks cool, and it's going to be like an end screen. I've never seen the ships be weaponized before, but I don't think we're going to get flight in Destiny ever, personally, as much as I'd love it. I think they're never going to be able to do it. But it would be cool to have what they originally announced, even if it was for the raid, where you see everyone arriving in their ships, like, even if you're on a planet already, which they kind of did with the Leviathan. But I would like it to go that next step, that if you're on a planet, you would just see the ship break orbit and fly down and drop someone off. I know it's, like, not necessary for the game to be, like, good, but I think little things like that really do heighten the experience of immersion and of, well, community. It feels really cool to see someone just blow out the fucking sky and land right next to you, and vice versa if it's someone that's not in your raid team, or someone that's not in your fire team, sorry, just coming down to the place that you're at. It just makes you aware that someone's joined the social space. It makes you aware that other people are playing, and it makes you aware that this is a very community-driven game. And I think stuff like that is very important, and I really do think that Bungie need to take into consideration with this new raid and with these new expansions, the idea that if this is a community-driven raid, there could be, maybe in the next DLCs, maybe in the next game, I would say probably in Destiny 3, that I would really like these ideas to come to fruition, some form of social raid. I think the whole idea of Destiny being sort of an MMORPG originally has translated in a good way. And I know I talk a lot of shit on Destiny, and I actually get a lot of flack for the stuff I say on Destiny. But like most things, I do it because I love it, and I want to see it improve. And I think that this whole idea of community, especially when it comes to raiding, needs to come full circle. There needs to be this moment where it's no longer like with strikes. You'll have these moments in between where you're running and you'll run into a social space. You'll run out of a social space. Vault of Glass starts in the social space, never goes back to a social space. The whole point is blending the two seamlessly. And unfortunately, probably the best example of this is actually that one strike with the boss that goes invisible. When you go through and you unlock the gate for the first time after the Arcshanks are coming over to the platform and your ghost is, you just drive out next to the Exodus Black. And there are people there doing public events, doing things. You're driving through, collecting your pillars of light. If you are just down there, well, not anymore because it's been removed from the playlist, but if someone's doing the mission per se, or if the heroic strike was back in the game, those beams of light would just be coming out of the ground for almost no reason. And actually, as a player, if you're not in the strike, you can actually go and collect those beams of light for people. I don't think a lot of people know that. If they come out the floor and you jump into them, it collects them for the fire team that's playing that strike, which is an absolutely awesome thing. It's tiny, but it puts that whole feeling of community into perspective. And it's something that you're not reminded of enough, I feel like, in Destiny, especially with things like the Raid, like with the Leviathan. I think the Leviathan was something that was a really cool concept, and I personally think it would have been awesome that when you're on the Leviathan, things could have impacted each other. The thing is with, like, let's say, the whole problem in the engine room. Quite literally, that's what the Eater of Worlds raid is. They have a little problem in their engine room. That's what one of the guys says. Let's see if we can help them deal with our problem as sort of like a joke, bit of banter. And it's obviously Argos. Now, when you go there and you kill him, it would be kind of cool if something in someone else's game was to freak out because you've started up the engine again, or because you've killed Argus, or Argus, whatever the fuck his fucking name is, or the Spire of Stars. Something's happening in the Spire of Stars, so this happens in your raid, you know. Maybe not necessarily it has to happen while someone else is doing it. Maybe, like, the moment the raid is completed for the first time that week, something is added on to other raids, or something is added on to that raid specifically for other fire teams, etc, etc. Little things like that, I feel, that aren't in things like the raid just need to be added in some way. And I do think the idea of a social space raid, where maybe even multiple fire teams could actually take on a raid boss, this whole idea of the new game type where 6v6 and you fight a boss and then teleport and kill each other, just imagine that being expanded to an actual game type like a raid. So you could have two people taking on two different bosses at once, or you could have two people going down separate paths, or they could join together, but they'll get like a buff if they go off in individual ways and try to take on two bosses at once, etc, etc. I know it's complicated, and I know it physically cannot happen in this game. I'm not saying it can happen in Destiny 2. Reason being, for this kind of thing to happen, Bungie would have to change their entire system, because it just wouldn't work with the platform that they use, unfortunately. The games engines they use, I've said many times, are very slow, very sluggish, and quite old. They're not amazing technologically, and I do think for this kind of amazing bombastic raid to happen, you would need so much work. It would require so much nitpicking and so much playtesting and a ridiculous amount of time and effort that you couldn't afford to spend 5-6 hours waiting for a file to load. You couldn't spend 2 days waiting for a boss to load in with all his animation presets baked. It just couldn't happen. You'd need to figure out all the little nuances that teams try and do. So like, oh, does the debuff work if 5 people go with 1 person from the other raid team? Does the debuff go if this happens? This. So many little counter things. It physically can't happen in this game. From my knowledge of their systems, I physically don't think it could happen because they are too set in their ways and things just aren't built to work like that. But another game, say Destiny 3, which unfortunately is being built on the same engine, so probably not once again, but if Destiny 4 was to happen, or Destiny a reimagining or something, that is something I can imagine. Just, I would love a social raid, or a raid with at least more than 6 people that necessarily don't pick each other. So 6 people go in and it match makes you with another random raid group, etc, etc, etc. You know? And of course, one of the biggest problems with that would be is how would the game handle a fire team being joined if 1 person has shot up the raid? Would a fire team be matched 6 with 1, etc, etc? There's just so many issues that Bungie would have to take into consideration and try and work around. But yeah, that's just my sort of thoughts on this whole new thing. I think it's a very interesting concept. I think that Bungie is definitely going in the right direction, but I do also think that this is not the time to let up and get back on our knees and kiss their boots. This is the time we need to pressure them the most, and it's the time that we need to put our foots down and say, you're in the right direction, don't you dare fucking turn around again. Because this is the situation. We have been down this road before. And they turned around and went down the other road, which EA and all those companies went down with microtransactions. And unfortunately, once you start on that road, it's very hard to get off, because I can imagine the amount of cocaine they probably intake with all the money they make off microtransaction is ridiculous. I'm only joking. They don't do cocaine. They're way more high class than that. They don't do party drugs. I hope not. Well, probably 1 or 2 of them do, but that's just off topic. Yeah, this is not the time to let up. This is the time that we need to say, we've seen you make improvements like this before. The argument last time is the Taken King is the way to go. This is the way to do it. They are now going down the same development path as the Taken King. This is what we need the game to be doing, and they need to stay on this path. And we cannot let up, because it would be very easy for them to once again do a complete spin and turn the idea on its head and make it very monetizable, which there is still controversy around that with the whole annual pass, but that is a completely different subject. As always, this is a conversation, so I hope you guys enjoyed this in some way, and anything at all, leave it in the comments. Peace out, guys, and as always, have a good one.